Had been married to a lady here from Indianapolis for quite a while, but early in 1928 they got divorced, and within a month or two he married a lady who had been an employee of his at the Miami Beach Aquarium, which he had started, named Lucille Musset, or Musset, I guess. For those of us that aren't French, it's Lucille Musset. He died 3 days after their marriage, though, from pneumonia. They did not have any children. His first wife is actually, at least not before he died, his first wife's actually buried just up in that section up there by her parents. One of the other founders, named Frank Wheeler, who's buried, we'll get closer to him later, but we won't get that close. He's buried in section 46, actually section 59. No, section 46, I'm sorry, which doesn't mean anything to you guys, I know. He's actually buried pretty close to David Letterman's father, but by coincidence. Anyway, on May 27th of 1921, just 3 days before the Indianapolis 500 that year, Frank Wheeler, who had a big Wheeler-Schreibler carburetor business in Indianapolis, the Wheeler building is still being used down in Fountain Square. Now it's an arts building. I think it's where the factory had been. Anyway, he got up, showered, shaved, got himself ready for the business of the day, then stuck a double-barreled shotgun in his mouth and killed himself because he was despondent over his own health and the suicide of a close friend. The fourth founder of the Speedway, a guy named Arthur Newby, apparently lived a pretty good life, and I couldn't find anything dirty about him.
I do. No.
Okay, we're talking about a lady named Mayrite Sewell who's actually buried under the tree over here, but the tree's kind of low. Those of you that want to get close to it, I'll stand in front of it. Not nobody can see me. Let me ask this question, I guess. Has anybody heard of Mayrite Sewell here? Mayrite Sewell. Okay, if I'd asked that question about 100 years ago, probably all of you would have been able to answer, at least all of you, well, you guys are all, 100 years ago, you're all here in Indianapolis, okay? Booth Tarkington, who's buried just over the hill, the author, when he wrote an introduction for a book, talked about her as one of the three great Hoosiers of the early 1900s. The first one being probably Benjamin Harrison, whose grave, we started right by his grave. The second one being James Whitcomb Riley, who's buried up there on top of that hill. We'll try to be up there about 9:10 because the sun sets at 9:15. So at some point in time we might just start running. So kind of keep your eyes on the clock. But then the third one was Mayrite Sewell. And time has not been good really to any of those people, but probably Mayrite more than the rest of them, because you guys haven't even heard of. You probably heard of Benjamin Harrison, and you probably heard of James Whitcomb Riley. She was very active in the women's movement, both in getting women the right to vote and other rights. Was the president of a club that was like the Over Club of women. They said she was like the president of 6 million women by virtue of that being in that club. Unfortunately, she died shortly after women did get the right to vote. I guess that's good enough for her good stuff. But right before she died, she published a book, and I meant to bring a copy with me, but I forgot. But it's called Neither Dead Nor Sleeping. A guy reviewing it in the paper said, "Nothing rocked the foundations of Indianapolis quite as much." Well, why? Why did this book rock the foundations of Indianapolis so much? It's because in the book, and those of you, I guess, that are interested in paranormal research, this might be the place. Shortly before her husband had died, she lost both of her husbands to tuberculosis. This is her second husband here, Theodore. He had said they were very prominent in the literary clubs. She started the Propylaeum, if you've heard of that here in town. Very interested in the arts and things. And he had said that if he found, May, if I find after I die, let me quote it here. He said this 2 weeks before he died. He said, May, if after my death I am able to ascertain that Jesus Christ had returned to his disciples after his crucifixion, then he would, quote, I guess, do nothing else until he had succeeded in returning to May, unless she met him first after her own death. Well, a lot of people in this time were kind of into seances and things like that. She herself had stayed out of spiritualism, thinking that it would tarnish her reputation as a feminist. There were other feminists that were very active in spiritualism. Tarkington's sister, who's also buried in the mausoleum as a young girl, had thought she had spiritualist or medium tendencies, and Riley went to a lot of seances at an artist's house named Richard Gurrell, who's also buried here. So it was kind of a, you didn't have TV to watch, you did other things. You sat around a table and called the spirits, I guess. But anyway, she had stayed away from those things. But after his death, she eventually somebody talked her into going to see a medium, a session with a slate writer, a certain kind of medium, I guess. And she answered, the slate writer answered some questions that probably only Theodore would have known the answers to. So she started to wonder if something's going on, kept pursuing it, and eventually got to the point, as she said in her book, Neither Dead Nor Sleeping, that she was able herself to communicate with her husband, and through her husband, other family members. Eventually she communicated with a pianist who had recently died, named Anton Rubinstein. And she also started communicating with some medieval monk who gave her the cure to her Bright's disease. If you read the book, a lot of it is she's talking about all these fasts that this monk put her through. Like for 3 months at a time, he would only allow her to eat one meal, a handful of grain or something a day. I don't remember all the details, but he just supposedly put her through a real regimen, and she eventually was cured of her Bright's disease. Well, she kept all this stuff to herself primarily. Apparently the worst of it, maybe I shouldn't say the worst, but she was most intense into it maybe just for a couple of years. Then she lived another 10 or 15 years pursuing other things, the cause of peace and different things. But she finally decided, well, hey, I'm about ready to die anyway. Who cares about my reputation? I'm going to be dead. I'm going to go ahead and publish this book because I found a lot of comfort, she said, in communicating with my dead. Maybe if other people hear this, they'll take some comfort too. So she published this book, and her reputation tanked, and you guys have not even heard of her. We did, though, those of you that were living here, in the year 2000, the Indianapolis Star asked all us readers to vote for who we thought was the greatest Hoosier of the 20th century. Well, Eli Lilly, who's buried right over there where they're taking pictures, was voted number 1. May Wright Sewell came in number 46, just ahead of Reggie Miller, who came in 47. So even though you guys haven't heard of her, she did still have somewhat of a reputation. And some books have been published about her recently, and I think her reputation's probably coming back a little bit, at least locally. Okay, let's just walk to the road, get our feet dry a little bit. That gate is open until the north one. Well, that's probably it. It's after 8 now, so it is. She goes to the back gate where you guys came in. We came in the one by the I don't actually have it locked. If she can. 34th Street.
Okay, 34
If she can somehow manage to reach behind it and let herself in. The lock is not actually locked.
That's 38 to what?